And perfect. And then Jenna, it is all yours.
Wonderful. So I have many questions today, and I want to start off by asking you guys, what were some qualities of a parent or caregiver in your life that you wanted to emulate when you became a parent as well?
Absolutely. Alesha, do you want to take that first or?
It's up to you if you want to go first.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I suppose for myself, I really enjoyed how playful and silly that my dad was, growing up. I think like that was something that I thought really resonated, simply because in life, you don't want to take life too seriously. And yes, you do want to set boundaries with your kids, but I think that, we lose a certain essence as we get older, where we think that everything has to be so, or at least most people I've come across feel like things have to be so rigid and so serious. And that's what maturing is, and becoming an adult. And I think that the cool thing that happens is that you're able to really experience those moments of allowing yourself to be playful and silly with your children. And in this case, with my daughter, it's been absolutely incredible to be able to go through those experiences with her. She's only 13 months now, but I think she really gets that sense and that feel for it's okay to be silly. Like sometimes in the morning, Karen will bring her in the bedroom and just plop her up onto the bed, and she'll literally, like, I'm still half asleep and she'll mount my neck and start like, bouncing up and down like I'm a horsey. Now that's one way to wake up. But I can tell you that I definitely don't think she would be that way if we didn't give her the license to know that it's okay to be silly and fun and playful, even at 13 months. And she's so cognitively aware, and she's so aware of her surroundings, that we're just really excited to see that side of her come out. So that's definitely how I lead with parenting, while also, as you say, setting boundaries, because as a wheelchair user and having things around the house, you definitely have to know where to place things and where not to place things, especially now that my daughter is running around and reaching and climbing and grabbing. So I think there's a balance there, the playfulness, but also setting the boundaries to make sure that she's safe and that everything is still within reach and is accessible for me. So that's been an interesting one.
Thank you.
I think Marco brings up a really good point. Once they're mobile, it gets really hard to be able to put things in the space that you can reach, but not where, your child can reach to keep them safe. So that can be really challenging. But I think some qualities in a caregiver or people that helped me growing up is just like patience and understanding, and giving me the space to like figure things out. You know what I mean? Like not having this like rigid like platform of like you have to do things this way, like giving me the space to know that I'll figure it out at some point. And I think that goes with parenting as well, in the sense of like, when you're a parent, especially when you're becoming a parent with a disability, I mean, any parent for that matter is being thrown so many things and you're learning new things. But it's really hard. Sorry, my help just arrived and my service dog is going crazy. So I think it's just really important to know that even as a parent with a disability, you will figure things out, and you have to give yourself that space and that patience. And also your child is really going to adapt as they get older. You adapt and your child overcomes, and you figure things out together. And you're a team. Like, I don't know if any of you follow Nina Tame, who's in the UK, but it's right here. But she posted a picture yesterday of her son standing on her lap in a supermarket to help her reach laundry detergent. And I mean, that's so that's what it is. It's just patience and understanding and figuring it out together.
And I think, to your point, Alesha, it's utilizing your children and showing them that it's okay to have differences in the way that you do things. And in fact, that normalizes the experience for your child. Right. And not to speak out of turn, but like Jenna, this is one of the craziest things for me, is like the learning and the understanding that in the beginning, remember on your podcast, when we had that interview, I was talking to you about my own insecurities around, would my daughter respect me growing up because I had a disability, or would she treat me differently because I was a dad with a disability? And I actually am discovering through this first 13 months that it's exactly the opposite, because that is the normalization. So when she's out there in public, or she sees somebody in a wheelchair on TV, she actually points and says, Dada, because she's associating the wheelchair with me, and with understanding that that's just a part of who I am. And it doesn't change the aspect of how she treats me at all. So that's been an amazing discovery for me. Yeah.
Well, with my goddaughter, when she was growing up, I obviously would take her for rides. And then I figured out that she just assumed anybody in a wheelchair would expect her to run up and jump on their lap and, go for a ride. And
Nice.
we had to have that conversation eventually. Nope, just Jenna.
Yeah, but see, that's amazing, because that shows that there's a level and a building of trust there that she's established with you, that she just feels like that's the norm. And I think that that's really exciting to learn, because it is an iterative process, and everything that you learn and go through, certainly in the first several months, or even days, weeks, is extremely difficult. But as you start to adjust, I think that people forget that when you have a child and you bring them home from the hospital, you're literally bringing home a complete stranger into your house, and now you have to learn how to completely change your routine forever. It's like 24 hours previous, you had one life, and then now you have a completely different life, and it completely changes overnight. But it's powerful. It's powerful.
Absolutely. It's a great word for this, actually. My next question is, can you think of some skills that you've learned from navigating the healthcare system that may have made you feel more confident being a parent with a disability, like better communication skills, patience, learning how to advocate for yourself, which in turn can really help you feel able to advocate for your child?
Wow, that's a really strong one. Alesha, do you maybe there's some differences in the US healthcare system versus Canadian? So I'd love to hear your take.
Sure. I definitely think advocating for myself and really, learning to speak up, especially before I became a parent, I had some issues. I have cerebral palsy, so I have a backlift and pump implanted, and I had issues for the better part of 6 months with my pump, and doctors basically didn't believe me because they had never seen it before present the way that it presented for me. And so during that time, I really had to learn to speak up for myself and advocate, because I was actually told by multiple doctors that I was being a waste of time and taking up valuable bed space. Turns out that my pump completely malfunctioned, or at least the catheter of the pump malfunctioned. But they had never seen it, and it was intermittent. So I'd be fine one day and then screaming and crying and all these things the next day. So I think really advocating for myself is a big one, because that will help you advocate for your child, but also knowing that it's okay to just like be yourself, and just kind of like, I'm trying to think how to put it, just to kind of let things like evolve as they do, but not being afraid to like ask for help. And I think that's a big thing with parents with disabilities too, is like, I remember crying in the hospital and being really overwhelmed, because the mama bear instinct in me was like, you need to care for your child. Like, you just gave birth to this human, like you need to be able to care for him. But the disability part of my brain had not caught up to figuring things out. And so I had to learn to give myself the space to figure things out and the time, because my mama bear brain wanted me to figure everything out immediately that second. And I had nurses in the hospital that every time I was holding my son, they wouldn't leave my side because they thought I was like going to drop him on the floor or something. And a really important anecdote to this question is, I went to go take my son for a walk because we were in the hospital for 6 days. And so my significant other, he was pushing me and I was holding Nolan in my arms, and I go like out of the hospital room and everybody's giving me like this death glare. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I don't understand. And finally somebody says to me, you can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean I can't hold my baby and like take him for a walk in the hall? Turns out on the back of the birth stats card that they put on your child's like bassinet when they're born, that says like what they weigh and how long they are, it says, you know, baby must remain in bassinet like the entire time in the hospital if they're going to be out of the room. Now, I don't know what parent would read the back of that card. It was like in the tiniest writing. But that just really showed me like the difference of being a disabled parent. Like, people were like so shocked and everybody's like looking at each other like, who's going to tell her she's not allowed to just hold her baby in her lap? But I think there's like, you know, there can be a lot of judgment from the medical system too when you have a child and you have a disability, because they don't see it often. So it's like, what is this?
Wow.
Yeah, wow. That is, now that card, Alesha, does it say that for all new parents? It says that on the card, like you can't remove the baby from the bassinet while they're in the hospital. That's, they didn't just have that typed down there because you're a parent with a disability, correct?
No, that's for everybody. I guess
Okay, good.
anytime you're leaving the room,
Right.
like the baby has to be secured in the bassinet, which I found it hilarious because in the room they have all these things about, you know, safe sleep, don't fall asleep with your baby in the bed, whatever, all these things. But that's what they choose to put on the back of the little card. And I personally had to undergo general anesthesia for my birth because of my baclofen pump and a series of other issues. So like, I really was out of it and not reading that, especially the first couple days. So yeah, that's for everybody, but you wouldn't think that was standard practice. I don't know how it works in Canada, but
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that on the card for us. But however, that being said, we were only in the hospital for literally 24 hours. The second that they said that we could take Stella home, we were out, because I don't want to be in the hospital. And I suppose my experience is a bit different because I'm the dad. So
right.
and my wife and I had our baby in smack dab in the middle of COVID. So the differences were interesting because the protocols around COVID, like I didn't know how I was going to be treated because I wasn't technically a patient. I'm just the husband type of thing. Are they going to have a space for me to lie down or, have some shut eye a little bit? Definitely there was no external visitors or anything like that at that time, which, in and of itself actually is somewhat of a positive thing, just
Right.
because you don't want your whole family scouring around you when you're just overwhelmed yourself trying to figure out, and this little baby is going to have its eyes closed majority of the time for the next couple of weeks because they're so tired and they're just getting used to everything. So it was an interesting experience. As far as my advocacy, it was just advocating that I was there for Karen and with Karen at any time that she needed me for anything, and that I had a space to do that. We were very lucky in that here in Canada, the healthcare is pretty decent, and we had an individual room that we had. So we weren't sharing a room with anyone else but ourselves.
Yeah, same here.
And that's not always the case in the States. I know that for sure, depending on people's healthcare, depending on the situation.
Right.
But we were very, very lucky, and that made the experience a lot more smooth. However, had I known that I would be basically sleeping on a rock hard lounger that felt like concrete, and that the light had to stay on all night, just for safety reasons, at least in the corner where I was at, that was an interesting experience. But the benefit is my wife and I went through the midwife route. So we didn't just use a doctor. We had a midwife that was much more personalized and much more tailored and used to our situation and experience, and came with us to the hospital. I would highly recommend a hybrid model like we did, of having a midwife, but then you do a hospital birth, because then you have all of the things that keep you safe if there's something that goes wrong in the hospital, but you have the extra care of being able to call this midwife at any time should you need anything leading up to the birth, or even afterwards. We had several weeks of follow-up with this midwife to double check and make sure. And it was honestly one of the best experiences. However, had we not known about that experience and being able to advocate for ourselves and be able to advocate for a hybrid model, even of, yes, we do want a hospital birth, but we do want to do it with a midwife, not with our family doctor or a specialist or anything like that. It was quite the experience. So I very much appreciated it, enjoyed it. And the healthcare professionals, even though they were strapped because it was in the middle of COVID, they actually had to get OR nurses taken out of the operating room to help deliver Stella because they were short staffed. And next thing you know, these exhausted OR nurses are coming in and I'm like, oh, are you helping to deliver the baby? Is this what you normally do? No, but we've done it from time to time and it's what we have to do now. And my wife is a total trooper. No drugs, nothing. She just did everything naturally. And it was kudos to her because I've had 13 surgeries and I know what pain feels like, but I can't even imagine birthing a child. So yeah, I tip my hat to my wife every day.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. My next question is, when you think of parents out there with a disability like Superman's Christopher Reeve and Rick Hansen, Chantal Petitclerc, and more, who's been a parenting with a disability role model that you think others would benefit learning more about?
That's an interesting one. Do you have one ready in mind, Alesha?
You know what? I don't, but that brings a really good segue as to why I started my nonprofit, Adaptive Parent Project, because when I was pregnant with my son and looking for resources, there was literally nothing, like nothing. I mean, the Adaptive Parent Project just became a nonprofit last year, but May 2nd was the 2-year anniversary of when I uploaded my first video on YouTube. And so I didn't really have anyone to reach out to. There was one mom with CP kind of local to my area that I had met, but her son is now like 12. So, you know, as far as like role models like that, I unfortunately didn't really have that. So I decided to create the change that I thought needed to happen, because there's really, at least for me, like there was no centralized place. I was like, why is there nowhere, like we're in 2022 or 2020 or whenever, you know, we started, and I'm like, why is there no central place for parents with disabilities to go find resources, to find videos of like different ways they've adapted things, you know? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to create this and hopefully we'll create a community, and parenting with a disability will be less isolating, because it's not like you go to your local park and like see a ton of parents in wheelchairs and walkers and canes and mobility aids, and you know, everybody's having a grand old time. And a lot of the times I feel like able-bodied parents can sometimes, depending on the area you're in, be you know, kind of scared to approach you and talk to you because they don't relate in a lot of ways. So sadly to say, I don't have like a role model. I mean, now I have a lot of parents with disabilities that I follow on Instagram. And for example, I just got to have dinner with Danny Isaiah a couple months ago, and that was like, I almost like started crying. I was so excited because it was so refreshing and so validating to be in the same space with someone. And she has twins that just turned 2 years old, and my son just turned 3. And so it was really nice to be able to have a conversation with someone that had a lot of the same physical limitations I do, that understood the struggle and understood how frustrating it can be when you can't adapt as fast as you want to, and it takes time to figure things out. And so really, I think my heroes are the parents that I follow in the Instagram community, because they get me. Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
No, that's really, really powerful. For me, I would say to be honest, like as far as role models with disabilities, I had a little bit more luck, I suppose, because I was involved in competitive sport. And so there was a lot of parents that I played wheelchair basketball with, or track and field, or things like this, who were parents far before I was a parent. I was starting playing with them when I'm 12, 13 years old. And so I'm watching them, as many of them were paras or quadriplegics, and I'm watching them navigate the situation and growing up with their kids, even seeing their kids start out as 5-year-olds, and by the time I'm finishing my competitive career, they're 14, 15, 16 years old. So it was cool to see that happen. And Jenny, you mentioned Rick Hansen. Alesha, if you don't know who Rick Hansen is, he's a very prevalent Paralympian Canadian who wheeled around the world in his wheelchair in the 1980s, and has now to date raised over $300 million for spinal cord injury research and disability related information and research. And I had the fortune of, growing up around Rick as well and learning a little bit from him. He has 3 daughters. They're all of adult age today. Rick is in his 60s, but it was really cool to watch that. That being said, that doesn't mean that I didn't have apprehensions or thoughts. I have CP as well, and so having cerebral palsy and not knowing how cerebral palsy was going to impact my ability to be a parent. And those types of things. But I would just ask those questions even before being a dad. How do you do this? How do you do that? If you remember, I know Marjorie's on the line. She's not really speaking today, but in my presentation last year in the Speaker Slam was all about my former basketball colleague, Murray, and how he told me when I brought up the issues around feeling like my daughter, what if my child in the future doesn't respect me? And my statement was, she'll just see me as dad. And that's what he told me, that she'll just see you as dad. And I never really knew what that meant until I experienced it. And now I understand, okay, wow, you're going to learn as you go. It's an iterative process. I can't quite say that I've gone to the lengths of looking on Instagram and seeing parents. Maybe that's just not my methodology. But learning as I go, talking to parents, there's a lot of the BCIT, the BC Information Technology Institute, which is like a college university here in British Columbia. There's a lot of programs that they do in terms of innovations for people with disabilities, and they have focus groups come in. And one of the doctors that's there, his name's Jamie Borisoff, who I played sports with growing up, and he has children as well. And he's done a lot of things like adapting things on the front of his wheelchair so that his chair could almost turn into a stroller and these kinds of things. So having those resources and knowing that those things were out there, immediately I felt like I had a hotline that I could call to. It's like, oh yeah, I remember having a conversation with Jamie a few years back about adapting this or that. Or I wonder, it's like, you know what, if I ever had to pull in a favor or pull in that call, now is the time to do it, is to learn directly from the sources of the people in my neighborhood. I've been thinking about it for years. It's like, why not reach out to those resources? But there were many resources as well that I didn't know if I even qualified for, because I, unlike many of my friends with disabilities, I don't have financial restraints like they do necessarily. And so I thought some of these programs were only reserved with individuals who are low income or things of that nature. And then I was being told, no, apply. Like, you should still see if you want to be a part of this program. If there's any way we can install smart tech in your home that would make things easier. Many of you, Jenna, I know you've seen my accessible crib. Like, these types of adaptations and things, like, don't let yourself hold yourself back from what they can do to make your life easier. Because that accessible crib just won the Tetra Society in Vancouver, the #1 vote, I guess, across Tetra North America for what they did for me with that accessible crib. And I don't actually get any of the benefit other than they get they're volunteers, by the way, that make these adaptions. They do it all voluntarily, and you pay what you can for whatever adaptions they create. I asked for an accessible crib. They made it. We made a video of it. It went somewhat viral and people loved it and they won. So they get to have a beautiful lunch on the house, just to say thank you to these volunteers. They don't realize that it's a simple crib, but the life sort of timeline that it gives me with my daughter and being able to adapt it as a toddler bed later on in life, like, is priceless. You can't put a price on that. And I wouldn't know these things or have learned these things if it wasn't for the people with disabilities around me that I witnessed and decided to have the courage to pick up the phone and give them a call. Yeah. Oh, and thanks. Yeah. Marjorie just shared the speech from last year. So thanks for that, Marjorie, in the chat.
Marco, if you would be willing to do a video on your Crib for Adaptive Parent project and just kind of share it with other parents, that would be amazing.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it could just be a super short video. Basically, Adaptive Parent Project, I just try to get as much information from other parents and what adaptations they've made to be able to share it with other people. So I have I have a Gertie crib, which is like the only accessible crib on the market. But I want so much for other parents to contribute so that it's not just me sharing my ideas, but if something I do doesn't work for someone, then they can find another parent on Adaptive Parent Project to be like, oh, that works better for me. So
absolutely. Well, I can even probably reshare the original post that I had where I do a bit of a walkthrough. If you've got it up on Facebook or on Instagram or anything like that, I can definitely share that out for you. But yeah, I could record a new one as well. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Let me share it. That would be great.
100%. Absolutely. But yeah, Jenna, I hope that answers your question. And I know not to flip the script and kind of do something unscripted and reverse it back on you, but I know that this is something for you, Jenna, as the interviewer, you've always had the desire to want to be a parent yourself. Yep. And I have to ask you, in learning what you've seen through either the Adaptive Parent Project or even on some of my videos and the adaptations that we've made, does that give you a little bit more confidence for yourself in terms of, you know, moving to the next stage of being a parent when you're ready?
Yeah, I am so grateful when I get to see this content out there, like you, like Alesha, sharing that, because it's awesome content that's engaging, isn't heavy, and is approachable. And something that I've really struggled with for a long time, because I've wanted to be a mom for a very long time, was seeing the commentary that also happens online or in person, what people will say. And it's so hard, especially if you're someone who, you know, is wanting to be a parent eventually, and seeing that and wondering, oh my gosh, like, am I wrong to do this? You know, people are saying that some people are selfish for, you know, wanting to be a parent with a disability. And it just has blown my mind over the years. And I wanted to know if you guys had any tips about navigating those situations where online or people coming up to you in person and having commentary that is really disrespectful, and unfortunately dealing with a lack of education on that. And that's why we need to be spreading representation when it comes to parenting with disabilities.
Oh, 100%. And you know what? To anyone who says you're selfish for wanting to be a parent with a disability, I've heard the exact opposite from people saying that you're selfish to not want to be a parent. You know, there's many people making the choice to not be a parent. And I think that that's totally fine as well. If that's what their life choice is, then that's their life choice. But people say, oh, it's so selfish because you just want your availability so that you could go on a whim to a concert or go out for the night or do this or that. Well, let me tell you, like, I'm shocked to hear that somebody would say that they're selfish for wanting to be a parent to have, you know, and having a disability, because there is so much that you learn about your own capabilities by being a parent with a disability that you wouldn't be challenged in the same way if you didn't put yourself through that experience. Are you kidding me? When you decide to be a parent in general, you're signing up for a life-changing experience for the rest of your life, whether you know it or not. And I think that yeah, we absolutely have had looks and things like this, but it's interesting. When I've been with Karen for 15 years, right? And so when we first started dating, you know, we got more looks way back then, more about, oh, is that his sister? Is that his nurse? There's no way an able-bodied, a very, you know, attractive woman could be with this guy here, right? And that was more of an issue. I actually find that after, you know, it's been years now, but people are not like that as much anymore. At least I find. In fact, when they see me, my daughter, and my wife out together, they're blown away. And in fact, my daughter is such an empathetic little girl that when we're at the shopping mall, Karen will take her out of her stroller and immediately she wants to help push daddy. She wants to be behind and push daddy. And the amount of looks we get from people, not in disgust, but in their hearts are melting. I mean, I feel like a celebrity sometimes when I'm in the mall with my daughter, because random strangers, I kid you not, this happened last week, are like enamored that she is like saying help, help, and she's pushing me in the mall, in the shopping center, and they can't believe that this little tiny person is doing these things and helping her dad. And if I drop something, she's picking it up off the ground and saying, here you go, and I'm saying thank you, and she's signing, you know, please and thank you and all these things, and they're just blown away by that. I actually even had some random guy start taking photos of us, and it was funny because it happened so quickly that I didn't really say anything. But later my wife and I were chatting and she goes, do you think we should have said something to that guy? And I said, I don't know. I think he was just blown away about how cute it was. I don't think that there was anything like super inappropriate about what he's doing, but there was part of me that was uncomfortable because there's this guy recording a video of my daughter and I. But you know what? If that's his education system, if that's his way of having dinner later that night, and he's going to go home and say, I saw the cutest thing ever, you should see this, and show and talk to his family, that's the best thing that we could ask for education. So if anything, it's actually allowed me to double down on wanting to be a dad and loving being a dad, and knowing that it's not always going to be the same, and that people are going to make assumptions sometimes. But you know what? Honestly, at almost 37 years old, Jenna, I really don't give a shit. To be honest, I if people are going to feel that way about me, that's their prerogative, and I'm going to live my life being happy with my wife and my daughter, and they can move on, So at least that's my approach. I find like as you get older, you give less of a crap.
Yeah.
Mind me saying, and that's where I'm at. So
it's good to hear. That's a good tip for people.
Absolutely, Marco. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about being a parent with a disability is from the get-go, children are learning, empathy and understanding and helping us and things like that. Like I remember I was practicing walking in my walker even like a year ago. And my son was pushing me in the walker going, help mama walk, help mama walk. And it was so weird for him because he hadn't seen me, walk at all. And I used to walk in a walker until I was 19, but my energy expenditure and oxygen output was like 5 times the normal. And when I went to college, I was like, okay, am I going to walk to class in a walker and fall asleep? Or am I going to use a power chair up and down these crazy hills of this? I went to University of at UCSD. So there's like 6 campuses and a bunch of hills. And so I decided to stop walking at that point to be able to save my energy for actually learning. But I think that's the beautiful thing is like, we're raising empathetic, understanding children that literally know no different than disability. So instead of learning about that, they get firsthand experience at home. So when we're out in the community, that seeing a person with a disability is quote unquote normal to them and not something like, oh, what is this? And, I read different books to my son and things like that. But it's honestly true. Like Marco's absolutely right. The older you get, I'm 32 and I just like, I don't care. And honestly, if someone has something negative to say, that just makes me almost want to work harder to like prove what I'm doing with Adaptive Parent Project, because there are plenty of able-bodied parents that may not be the best fit parents for, whatever reason. So I always say, your ability to walk or do XYZ or whatever doesn't define whether you can parent or not. Like my son doesn't care that I don't walk. Like I'm no less of a person because I don't walk. And especially now having him, there's no way that I would like try and walk and hold him or anything like that because I'd like fall over. But that's just the thing, like people have negative things to say to me sometimes, but it's just like, okay, that's your life. Like there are plenty of people that, may be addicted to drugs or whatever. And people may think, oh, like that person's a more fit parent because they're able-bodied, but your abilities in that sense don't really affect whether you compare it or not. Like if you want to have a child and you love your child, it doesn't matter whether you're disabled or not, whether you need help caring for them or not. Like I always try to remind myself, like my son's not going to be 3 forever. Like there's a lot of things that I need help with right now to like care for him, but he's not always going to be 3. Like eventually he's going to grow up and be a child and then be a teenager, and it's going to be all right. Like you just have to remember you're in a certain stage for a certain period of time, and that's just what it is. It's a stage. And honestly, even now at 3, like my son is becoming so like Marco said, picking things up off the floor. Like for example, last night he had his dinner plate on the floor where he eats in the living room on the mat, and he was like, "Here, mama, can you please put this in the sink?" And I was just like, this is beautiful. Like, and from at least from other able-bodied parents that I talk to, their children aren't necessarily always that inclined to do things like that because they don't have to. Like that's not something they're used to. But it's kind of amazing, honestly. Like I feel like it's better, but I might be biased.
I agree with you. No, I agree with you. I hope, if anything, this is like a sales pitch to Jenna of don't give up on that, because because honestly, I and you know me, Jenna, I'm pretty outspoken, so I don't really care about what most people think if they have misconceptions about things. My whole role as a speaker and a consultant, an accessibility consultant, is just that, is to remove stigmas and barriers and people's perceptions of what I'm capable of and what people with disabilities around the world are capable of. And I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I didn't want to pass that or impart that down to my daughter, little by little, day by day, within the actions that we do, right? So it all comes down to your life choices and the type of person that you want your child to be. Maybe this is the old school gamer in me, but I always look at being a dad is almost like having a character in a game. You're this avatar, and they have the choice in the game of going down the good path or the bad path. And I actually love the gamification of my life, of knowing that every decision that I make changes and affects and impacts my daughter on the type of person that she's going to become. Mm-hmm. And I love that about it, because I want to level her up to be the most empathetic. If there's a meter of it, of empathy, compassion, understanding, I'm cranking those meters up, and I'm doing everything I can in the game to make it better for her so that she can be the strongest, best version of herself. I take it very seriously. So I kind of joke because my background's in video games, but in all seriousness, the decisions that we decide as parents are going to change the person that she becomes. Her influence and impact of the nature that is around her is going to change the person that she is. And I remember that every single day. I'm cognizant of that. And I want her to grow and be body confident and be all the things. And look, the fact that she's even walking better than I am today at 13 months, I say kudos to you, my girl, because I can't wait to see what she's doing. She loves being outside. I want to get her into Ninja Warrior. I'm a huge fan of American Ninja Warrior and all that stuff. And I very much, because of my sporting background, I love physicality. So the fact that I'm seeing her wanting to do somersaults now and she's climbing everywhere, my dream would be if she wants to get into gymnastics and do something physical to let her energy out in ways that I could never do as an athlete, but just, she's doing it differently. That is awesome to me. So I'm excited to see where things go with it.
I started learning karate when I was 4, and it was, Ninja Turtles. So everybody was so excited when they were little kids to be part of the Ninja Turtles with karate. It was so funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I think that, we've shared a lot about how to kind of get educated, not only for us who want to be parents with disabilities, but also what others can learn from that as well, even if they're able-bodied. And so I think that it's really important if we can kind of zone in on how do you find motivating and well-rounded resources you could trust that allowed you to see the ability versus the disability. Because just like we were talking about with the healthcare system, you'd think that doctors would be, taking, your care in a very certain way. And then all of a sudden they really try to limit you in some ways. And some of these healthcare professionals can end up doing that. And so I think that it's really important for people to know, how do you go about finding the right resources that are going to help you move forward and learn more?
Alesha, I think that's definitely one for you with the adaptive parenting project to kick us off at, in terms of the resources. You've probably had yourself in the trenches a lot longer than I have in terms of the digging. So I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, it's really hard. And that's why I started Adaptive Parent Project, because, for example, looking for a wheelchair accessible crib, there was another company that I'm not going to mention that I was trying to go with, and they sent the crib and it was like missing pieces and it was a disaster. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So my dad had to fight and like send it back and like threaten to like take them to the whatever like the child safety certification is. And so like that was a disaster. And then I found a Gertie crib, but I think that's something that's so hard, because like being disabled is expensive. Like most of us know that, at least in my experience, wheelchairs, walkers, like my wheelchair that allows me to stand up, my insurance didn't pay for. And it's like $12,000 just so I can stand in my chair and not fall over and be safe. And, even my crib was almost $3,000. Now I was able to reach out to United Cerebral Palsy, which was a huge help. But other than that, there really are very few resources. And that's why I created Adaptive Parent Project. And we're in the process of, trying to build and launch a website where we're going to have all those resources. Like, where do you find a PT and OT to come to your house after you have a baby to help you adapt things? And, how do you find a maternal fetal medicine doctor that is accustomed and comfortable with caring for people with disabilities and doesn't see it as like, oh, it's, it's something that I'm not used to. Like, my maternal fetal medicine doctor was the head of maternal fetal medicine at UCSD. And he was like, I do this all the time. Like, let's have a baby. Like, to him, me being disabled and the fact that I use a wheelchair wasn't a big deal. Like, yes, we knew I was going to have a C-section, but other than that, it was like, there's no reason. So I mean, for me, honestly, it was really hard to find resources, but I think, that's where social media at least came in for me. But to be honest, during my pregnancy, I kind of like shied away from social media and took a break because I wasn't sure of the stigma and everything that was going to happen. And so, even some of my friends joked like, oh, you had a Kylie Jenner pregnancy because nobody knew that, you were going to have a baby. And then all of a sudden there's just a baby. But then after my son right after he turned 1 and I decided to start Adaptive Parent Project, I kind of grew a lot of strength and confidence in myself and was like, you know what, like, I don't care what people think. I don't care what the government thinks. Like, I'm just going to be me and I'm just going to start this and help people, because there is nothing. And at least for me, having a newborn and an infant and not having resources was really isolating. And so I was like, I have to change this. But I think that's the thing, is resources are so hard to find. There's no central place, at least that I know of, that I've found, and I've done hours and hours and hours of research. Everything's kind of fragmented everywhere, and you're like trying to put pieces of the puzzle together, but they don't necessarily fit. And so my goal with Adaptive Parent Project is to be as much of an all-inclusive resource as I can for not only the United States and North America, but the whole world. Like, I want to have places on my website where you can upload pictures of accessible parks and put information about it. So somebody could go onto our website or in the future onto an app and be like, I'm in, like Australia and I want to take my child to, an accessible park, or I need to find a doctor, or I need to find, a lactation specialist. Like, I want to be that all-inclusive resource because I don't really think it exists. Please, someone tell me if I'm wrong. I'd love to find more of an all-inclusive resource, but I haven't found it yet, so I'm trying to create it.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's awesome. And that's
Yeah.
super ambitious. Like, Jenna, clearly you can see there's an appetite for this type of content. It's exactly why we're having this panel discussion today. I got to tell you, I've been blown away in some of my contacts in news media and in social media and things that have wanted me to come on as a guest on the show or a contributor on the show, and they can't get enough of me talking about being a parent with a disability. And I think it's because of exactly that. The resources are just so few and far between. But Alesha, you brought up a really good point in approaching the United Cerebral Palsy Association. I think like whatever associations, groups locally to you, whoever's watching this, listening to this, do your research in terms of the groups that can help you, to support you to find grants at the very least, so that there's less of a financial burden on some of the equipment that you might need. I really did some sleuthing, and that's how I found out about the Disability Foundation's Tetris Society, and that Tetris Society is what made that adaptive project, but they do many different adaptive projects and they service all across North America. So if that's something that's interesting, I think it's tetrisociety.org is the website for the Tetris Society specifically. And if that's something that people are interested in and they think that they may have a physical limitation that is creating a challenge for them, then they could get an adaptation that would change their life. This is not strictly just for parents, I might add. This is from everything from people who want to be artists, musicians, hold their instrument, and they need an adaptation. But in my case, I was coming in asking for adaptive crib, right? And that's made a huge impact. The Technology for Independent Living, and that's more of a organization in the Okanagan here in British Columbia. They're the ones that said to me, Marco, you already have all this smart home technology. Why don't you have us pay for it? Pay for any additional stuff. I said, well, I don't need that. They said, yeah, but it's available. Oh, okay. We also have an automatic door program. Did you want to apply? I said, how does that work? Well, if you need an automatic door in your condominium installed, every one of our members has the opportunity to apply for at least one. So whether this is your home now or you're waiting for your forever home, let us know and we can install an automatic door if that's something that you need to be hands-free. I said, what? That's sometimes it's tens of thousands of dollars. And they said, well, that's part of our program. So I wouldn't have known that, but the second you start digging in your community, finding out about the local resources, finding out about the local not-for-profits that are out there. They may be not-for-profits, but not-for-profit organizations are savvy and they find ways to meet gaps and find gaps and niches in services that you didn't know was possible. See if you can develop some form of partnership. If you do have financial limitations, is there a possibility for you to advocate for them and be an ambassador? Maybe there's a quid pro quo sort of thing where you could do some advertising for them and speak about your experiences, and they could give you either a discount on what they offer, or maybe they can do something for you as a part of a way of, good PR for that organization. You never know until you ask. So I encourage everyone, find the courage inside of you to find the organizations in your area that work for you, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, what can we do to collaborate? You'd be surprised at the number of people that would say, I'm actually interested in collaborating. Thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Awesome. I think an important question from my perspective that I've really wanted to talk to some people about who are experts on this right now was, given that some people are born with a disability, some people have degenerative conditions, and some people might have acquired injury. And Marco, we've talked about how there's temporarily able-bodied tab. So we never really know if or when we might need to parent with a disability. how can we continue to create the opportunity to normalize parents with a disability so that future parents and their support networks are better able to recognize the ability and resilience more than the disability?
I have some ideas, but Alesha, please go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, please start off because that's a really deep question and I'm still trying to roll through it.
Well, okay, so my advice would be, don't be the one that shames yourself, if that makes sense. Don't be the one to hide away your experience because you're embarrassed by being a potential new parent with a disability and you don't want to be seen in public at the park so that people are gawking at you or you think that they're going to be gawking at you. The way you can normalize that, start having those conversations. Literally, I take my daughter to the park every other day with my wife, and there's parents that don't have disabilities and they see me interacting with my daughter and they can clearly go, understand when I go, hey, honey, come over here, come back to daddy. Oh, wait, that guy's her dad. And then I get those parents coming up to me at the park. Oh, how old is she? So like just seeing and treating me normally, just like one of the other parents at the park, that is creating a conversation that's also creating potentially a mind shift for the parents that I see out there in the community. And they go, wow, this is possible. Wow, I love the way that dad in the wheelchair carries his daughter around on his lap. And he feels so confident to do that when he's at the park with her. He doesn't look afraid at all. That is what creates conversations. Even if you're not a fly on the wall later on that night and they go home and have dinner and explain everything that they saw, those are the ways in which you're going to normalize things. And then second piece to that would be creating societies that are universally designed and accessible, because then it doesn't look like a struggle or a strain for anyone with a disability to be able to utilize whatever is in their environment to make life easier. So the more that we have spaces that are accessible to everyone, regardless of your ability, the more it's going to be easier to parent, because we don't have to bring special adaptive sticks or crazy things, that we need to make it easier, because the environments that we're in naturally do that for us. And I'll continue to push that message and push the needle forward on that as an accessibility consultant and as a speaker. I'll continue to spread that message, but man, has it opened up some incredible conversations just by being confident and not shying away from sometimes awkward or difficult conversations with people. Oh, how long have you been in a wheelchair? Oh, what was that like to be a dad, starting out? I've had people ask me every question, complete strangers, in ways that they probably wouldn't approach somebody who was able-bodied, but that's okay. The disservice that I could do is say, hey, buddy, F off, it's none of your business, that's not going to help anybody, because then they're going to get a chip on their shoulder of saying, I'm never going to approach a person with a disability again because of the experience that I had. I want to be one of the good experiences so they feel more confident to be a little bit more empathetic. Obviously, I'm not going to entertain really silly or malicious questions if I know that somebody's trying to line me up just to be a jerk. But I am going to, turn it back on them and ask them something awkward and then see how they like it, type of thing. And then we have a real conversation. And if they go, hey, you can't ask me that, and I say, well, you just asked me something very similar. So, let's have a conversation about that. And I kid you not, the times where I flipped that around and that person started out as aggressive towards me and mad, by the end of the conversation, they're shaking my hand saying, hey, you know what? Thank you very much for opening my eyes and having me see things a little differently. So I think that you have to have a bit of a thick skin. I think anyone with a disability can relate to having a bit of a thick skin, but use that to your advantage in your ability to be a strong parent.
I think Marco is absolutely right. I think exuding confidence really helps, and just being okay being yourself out in the community and out in public to show people that it is possible. Because I've had people come up to me and they like Marco said, sometimes they don't realize that you're the parent until you're like, come here, honey, come back to mom, and they're like, oh, you're the mom. Like, I think just being present and being out there and not being afraid to, answer questions, of course, like Marco said, not ones that are malicious or just to be silly or, rude. But just kind of being okay and being able to be a voice for the community of disabled parents, because, at some point in your life, somebody is going to end up disabled, whether they're, just born or they're 80. And if you don't end up disabled, you're probably gonna, if you're not alive, you're dead. So, I think we need to bring on the fact that disability at some point in life is normal, and it's a process that eventually everybody is going to go through at some point. But just like Marco said, that second piece to that is universal design. I don't know if any of you have seen the post that I made on Instagram recently of me, and it's a shadow of me on the grass, and my son is in the distance with his dad playing in the sand and the water, because my power chair or my manual chair can't handle sand like that. And I said, it's 2022 and I'm frustrated that, I'm not able to just immediately go access the sand and the water with my son and play with him. And I have to watch him from a distance. And I said, I'm not saying this for pity. I'm saying this because it's 2022 and there should be universal access everywhere. There's no reason that there can't be, paths that are carved out and created so that people can wheel on them. Because universal design doesn't inhibit anybody from being able to use things. It allows everybody to use things. And so, like Marco said, again, I think if people see that there's less strain and struggle, and we're not having to lug 50 million things with us to make life easier, then that's just kind of become like a normal part of society.
Yeah. Wow.
I fully agree. Yeah. Sounds like you need a couple Moby mats. That's what there's a company called Moby Mat here in Vancouver that does mats and beachfront areas that are blue, tough mats that go over top of sand, and they allow you to wheel in your chair. There are manufacturers out there, but we got to start, fighting the good fight and being champions for those organizations to get out there and advertise that in your, the major beaches, especially throughout California. You've got this beautiful backyard that you call home, and you're not able to appreciate it fully in that way. We got to change that for you.
Right. And they got to make portable mats that aren't so heavy so that you can bring them with you.
That's right. Well, I see Marjorie coming on camera here, so it looks like we're probably at the end of our time, but this has been awesome. Jenna, I hope as the moderator that you've gotten a few extra nuggets that you didn't have before we started, and that this has been great for you as well.
Yeah, and I have people I now know to reach out to when whoever my child ends up being comes around.
That's fantastic.
I want to thank you, all of three of you. I mean, that was amazing. I was feeding the comments because every time you would sort of share a story, I was like, yeah, me too. My son pushed me and he loved that. And he was Dr. Thomas.
I saw that, nurses. Dr. Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the most popular kid on the ward in the hospital and the rehab center. It was just fabulous. And it was interesting also to listen and sort of go, oh yeah, because my son is, a preteen. So things might change. And yes, they're cute when they're young, and then something happens. And they're not always cute. Sometimes
I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
I looked at videos from last year and watched Chantal, and it was really interesting when she was talking about how she went across the street with her son Elliot at that point, and her plan was to have him have his hand on her lap. And it was so interesting because it literally made me think of being 5 years old. I kid you not. And just literally watching parents and doing very basic things like taking their kid across the street. And my brain automatically, even as a 5-year-old, I started to think, how would I do that in a wheelchair? And so that was something that even I, came up with. I'm so surprised that, Chantal, used that as an example, because apparently I was on the money even as a 5-year-old. So
yeah. It's really, I think, about sort of finding this community and realizing that there's a lot of things that we do that we all think of, or that somebody might have another solution. And I
Mhm.
think it's about sort of being creative and open to different solutions and how we could do things. But
Mhm.
certainly I like Marco's, and on that I think we'll end. I love Marco's comment about sort of championing those companies who make those adaptations and who are willing to work with us to make sort of parenting with a disability normalized and be like any type of parenting. So that one I will remember, and I thank you so much. And thank you all of you. And I hope to see you guys on May 25th. It's going to be with researchers. So this time it's a little bit different in terms of the conversation. But a lot of what was talked about today is also what we see in research. So it's not just like us four, it's a whole bunch of people who are going through the same things. And it's time that we sort of amplify those voices. And that's also what we're going to be doing on June 1st. So we hope that you will join us on that event as well. So thank you so much, everyone, and
Thank
talk
you.
soon.
Yeah, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.